people have so pointed out. You know, we left off at verse 26. You know, the God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness. And we're just talking about, I think we got as far as talking about this idea of us. And what were some of the things we talked about as far as the relevancy of us?
Triune God.
Triune God, okay? That is the God we worship in three persons. What else?
Sometimes it looks like you repeat things and I guess it's trying to get us through our thick head. I really mean it. And he says it, and I tell you what I told you, and you know, that sort of.
Okay.
That seemed to be very pervasive. It just comes right out after. Well, I already said that, but read that.
Right.
Very, moves up to the top of the heap.
Yeah. Well, we're going to see that because he's going to talk about making man and woman, and then he's going to, repeat the whole story again. What else about us?
Well, about us, we think of the triune, think of body, soul, and spirit. Even if there be the image of the triune God, with all that means. Fellowship with the broken and restored.
Right.
We can chase rabbits all day, but just with the realize that we're here as part of creation, as part of the plan, His purpose for us, and that we are the capstone of creation with a special and different from all the rest of creation.
Right.
Because we were actually created out of creation, not necessarily created.
Right. Well, and this idea of special, you know, everything else we heard being created, did he ever say, let us, and then he made the birds? Let us, and he made the light. Let us. This is, if you would, a different formula that he uses now. Nowhere else as he was doing all the creating was it let us. So there's a shift now when it comes to making man and how he talks of this creating. There's now a different formula, if you would, as to how he goes about this process. And so it leads us to believe, if he's now changing his MO, if you would, that there's something that is what? Different, unique about us. There's something different about us than everything else that he made. And so it is that. So what's the next thing he said? So let us make man in what?
Our image.
Our image. There again, it's still plural. So what does, lost my marker. So our image. So what does that mean? What does that mean?
So would our be a reference to the triune God?
Okay.
It's not my image, right? It's
Right.
our image, so that's a plural.
So this is tied into here, and you're right, so it's still a plural.
King James says likeness.
Okay, likeness.
My Bible notes says the characteristics of God, so they don't just like the visual, but the
Hands of God because
Okay. Something like
That's not my charge.
that. All right, so now we're getting to So perfect,
Mine says reflective of God's glory.
reflective of God's glory, okay?
And that says human being is worthy of honor and respect.
All that is in that, instead of the one word, or is that in a footnote?
It's in footnote.
Oh, okay, so that's down in the study notes. So, human being worthy of, what was it?
Respect and honor.
Human being worthy of respect and honor, okay?
Verse goes on to say to have dominion over.
We're still here at our image. We're not jumping ahead. We have to unpack this before we get to that.
I know it's also said, like, that made him ruler over the rest of creation.
Right, that's jumping ahead.
Says we have the ability to reflect His character.
Okay, reflect his character, okay?
His image which suggests kinship or fellowship with God and the rest of creation did not share.
Okay, now we're getting kind of somewhere. So, our image in God's image, but that we're created in that image means what? That there's something to do with, if you would, the fellowship that's going to be between God and man.
Almost had oneness was broken and restored.
Yeah. Don't be jumping ahead. But yeah, that there's a oneness to that. That what is unique about God at this point that's different than us at this point? God can't what?
He can create things just by saying it.
Okay, he can create things by saying. God is also, does God have a beginning? Does God have an end? God is eternal, as everlasting. So what is this that we were created in the image of God tell us about Adam and Eve originally? Their intention was to be what? Forever. Forever, that they were to be everlasting. That they are in his image. That he is perfect. When we say perfect, what do we mean by that?
Without sin.
Without sin. Holy. So they're without sin. Okay? What else about image?
I have a footnote here, it says, image includes such characteristics as righteousness and holiness.
Okay? So what does righteousness mean? It's a word we throw out. What does it mean? What does it mean to be righteous?
In awe of the Lord.
Okay, in awe of the Lord.
Without blame.
It means
Do we have any English teachers here?
You need an E before.
Oh, yeah.
it's
Right with God.
faith.
Faith. Yeah, ultimately it means faith.
Unbroken faith.
Unbroken faith. Right. Righteous, right with God. Okay? This whole image thing also, it's kind of an interesting thing. When we think of Jesus, we think of Jesus, what? Coming in the flesh and becoming like who? Becoming like us. Don't we like to think what? like us? Don't we like to think a lot of ourselves? That Jesus became like who? Like us. What if, when it talks of the image of God, did God already know what Jesus would look like?
He was standing there next to him.
Yeah, not in the flesh yet, but the second person. So would God have already known what Jesus would look like when he came in the flesh? He did. And Jesus is what? Holy, perfect, righteous, without sin, without death. Even though he dies physically, he lives eternally. It's not perhaps the image of God that we are fashioned in. Not that Jesus was made like us, but that we were fashioned after him. Wouldn't that make a whole lot more sense than thinking so much of ourselves and saying, oh, God made his son to look like us.
Isn't that where we go wrong, because we're using the word image as a photo instead of saying as the being, the essence
Right.
is a photo.
Yeah, could be.
That Jesus was blonde and blue.
Yeah. Of course he was. We got a picture of him right over there. You know?
Yeah, speaking of that picture, wasn't Jesus a Jew?
Yes, he was.
Wouldn't that mean he had a darker skin color?
Most likely.
Most of the pictures you see, he's got this nice long blonde wavy hair with blue eyes and he's as white as can be.
It's interesting though. You only find that in an Anglo church. Go into a black church and Jesus is what? He's black. You know what's interesting? I have pictures from like Oriental churches, and guess what Jesus looks like? He's Oriental. You know?
Maybe he is what he is to each.
Well, no, Jesus wasn't a chameleon. And his eyes didn't move when would follow you when he moved.
The very first chapter, very first.
And he is as we should be, neither Jew nor Greek, neither man nor woman.
Well, no, he was a man. That's more
Well,
reflection of God.
the spiritual, in the whole image and whatever, in the perfected us with the, I mean, called out, neither Jew nor Greek, man nor woman.
Yeah, and that's where we're talking about the household of faith. You know, than really this idea of image of God. But I think if we understand that this image is a reflection using, but it's of Jesus. So we come looking like him. God made us looking like what he would be, or will be, or whatever term you want to use. And so that points to something about us and who we are in relation to God. We're formed and fashioned after what? His own very Son. Does that make sense? Now, it's maybe a blow to our ego that, oh no, God made him like us. No, actually it's the other way around.
But we all know what's the same.
No, that's true. It also says male and female, so is it actually referring to our individual characteristics, or is it referring to our humanity?
Well, our image is apart from our appearance.
Yes. Yeah, it's who I am in my heart. Henry?
One thing I don't know, or we don't know, is how much we changed after sin.
Yeah, which
There
then
were-
takes,
There were physical
Right.
changes that took place, and that part we have no idea. So Christ came
Oh.
back, even though we were in his image, it was perfect
right,
when he came.
right. Oh yeah, Luther goes into a whole diatribe about this idea of what was Adam like before the fall, and he argues that Adam would have had the vision of an eagle, he would have had the strength of a bear, that he would have, I mean, because what? As we're going to hear, man is given dominion, that man is the pinnacle of creation. And so would there be anything else in all of creation that would have been able to do something man probably could not do, other than maybe fly? Because we don't hear of man being able to fly. But if we're the pinnacle of creation, wouldn't we see as well as the best? Be as strong, be as whatever, I mean, that's kind of Luther's way of thinking on this.
So eyeglasses and everything like that, that's all a result of
Of the fall.
the fall.
Right.
And I always thought it had to do with relationship, right? They were in the garden, there was just perfect relationship with God, and then when we sinned,
Right.
that really, we just stepped away from God, and so then Jesus was sent to repair our relationship. So I always thought of being the pinnacle of creation as being, the closest we can be to God, to, loving him and glorifying him the way he deserves.
Yeah, certainly it fits. That if we're in his image, we had a right relationship at that moment.
Well, I think being in his image, it also means that we were created, man was created with God's law written on our hearts. So
Okay?
when man fell and that law was broken, that created the separation between us and God.
Yeah, we'll come back to that point here in a few verses. But somebody was asking if we could get out of chapter 1 the other day, and so we won't go down that rabbit trail just yet. We're close. All right, so let's make man in our own image, after our likeness. And I would argue that image and likeness, I mean, we've kind of covered much of that here in likeness. That's right, brown hair, blue eyes. Well, I think he was probably partially bald and maybe a little overweight, but.
As a result of the fall.
Yeah. That is true. All right. So even though we read them, does somebody want to read the rest of 26 through 27?
And let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heaven, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them.
Right, so we kind of have this circular speak, God created him, then he goes back, God created him, and we're going to even hear it again, God created him. So that's kind of redundant. But man was given to have what? Dominion. What does that mean? Rule over. Man was given a rule over. Remember that. Beasts of the field, birds, all that kind of stuff. So what does that mean? Does that mean
A benevolent, caring force.
benevolent and caring for?
Yes, God is to creation as God is to us.
Ah, so there's a point. Is man created to serve creation, or is creation given for the sake of serving man?
Second.
Man to serve creation?
No.
No, it's the second.
If we're given dominion over it,
But God has maybe no and God's person.
but who did God turn that control over to?
I guess both.
Well, we talk about there's a whole different concept of stewardship. The stewardship of money, and the stewardship of God's gifts. We talk about serving and serving creation, and serving people. And I think out loud,
But all of the birds and the animals and livestock and all that is there for our use too.
but
But we don't.
Well, hold on. So let's just think about this. So God has what? Dominion over
Everything.
everything. Man was created in whose image? The image of the birds, the image of the fish, the image of the beasts of the field, and the image of God. So man is to do what? If God rules over all of this, what is it telling us man is to do? To rule over it all. So not to pick out whoever, just to rule and to take care of. Is that the same thing?
yes,
It's a part of.
builders to get. We're not talking about the image of God as God intended. We're talking as God intended to rule as God rules in God's image. Then we're talking of a totally different kind of rule. We get to the love and the benevolence and the caring for and the responsibility for. If we are in God's image, just because we have broken that, take a rule anymore in terms of sin, fallen mankind, after, 10,000 years of the duration of humankind.
Right, but you're right. Let's not look at but let's keep it simple. Let's not try to make it more complicated. Let's just keep it simple. What does it mean to have rule, to have dominion over something?
I would say that maybe the purpose of it be to maintain the order that God set out in the first place.
Ah. Since it's a God of order, perhaps to rule would be to maintain that order. I mean, we're getting somewhere. Because what does he go on to do? Because we're going to hear, he's going to stipulate what that order would be. So I'm just going to read the next part. So, and God blessed them, and we heard that before. And I didn't mention last time when we talked about God blessing, we talked about a blessing is to increase. But in this case too, Luther contends when God blessed the animals, he immediately followed it up with procreation. And so in this case, what God is blessing them to do is to be what they've been created to what? To be.
After a man named.
Well, that's the animals and stuff coming up. Right. But man is created to be, or blessed to be what God has created him to be. Now that sounds like I'm talking in circles, but in the case of procreation, it means that he's going to tell them to what? Procreate, to breed, fill the world. But with this idea of order, who wants to read 28? 28 through the end of the chapter, and we'll just,
And God blessed them, and God said to them, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it all, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And God said, Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food, and to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life. I have given every green plant for food, and it was so. And God saw that everything he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning the sixth day.
okay. So based upon what we read, this idea of order, this idea of rule, what does God tell man about what that's to look like? They say go off and do what you want? Does he say, let your life be ruled by the trees or the animals? What does he say?
Give them authority over.
He's given them authority over it.
It says to rule over them. Is it an assumption that they know how? Do they have the answers to rule, or the rules to rule? Rules?
Okay.
No, but the man has the rules. It's man will rule, be ruled. Mine says rulers over everything.
Right. Okay.
But where does it, are we coming on that? Does man already have knowledge of how to rule?
Was in the image of
Again,
God.
do they know what the rules are? I know they're in the image.
But did he,
But they were made perfect, so they must.
So if the answer is yes, the assumption is they know how.
Reflecting characteristics.
Because we were
right?
created in his image,
Right.
we have those rules written on our hearts.
Right, but does he not also right here tell them what that means? That they're to have dominion, they're to have rule over, and he lists out, here's what you are to look over,
And that has the birth to be responsible for these
be
lives.
responsible for.
And they have the knowledge to take,
Sure.
and that was just my question.
Yep.
I already have
They
the
always
answer.
said,
Yeah, I mean, Adam and Eve, Adam had perfect knowledge too, right? Like I say, Luther, like I say, goes off on this thing, they had great vision, super strength, I mean, they were the perfect Marvel comic
And
creation.
Avengers.
Yeah, yep, they were all the adventures rolled
And
into
the
one.
knowledge he gave Adam,
Except maybe Iron Man, I don't think he had a suit, but other than that.
I think they
the
were
knowledge
the,
he gave Adam what he liked to do.
Well, we'll hear about that.
they were in perfect fellowship with God at the time. They were no separation from God. I mean, he talked to like walking with them, talking with them. Like they were always in a continuous presence of the Father. They were never, they were never separated from God. Their God was always there.
Well-
in and through them.
We'll talk about that. Well, let's stay on this rule and, so, no, I would say that, I mean, it's just like the question of when it comes up, when God says, if you eat of it, you will die. People, well, they had never seen death, how would they know what die was? Well, because They knew die was the absence of life, if nothing else. Because all they knew was life, and so to hear die would be the absence of what? But when we look at God, when God has dominion over this world, he uses all things for what? His purpose. So does that possibly not tell us, if we're given dominion over creation, as God has said, is creation to serve our purpose, or are we to serve creation's purpose? God's purpose, but we've been given dominion over this, his creation. Adam was given dominion over his creation. Was he to use creation for his own benefit or for the benefit of creation?
They would benefit each other.
I see it as we're there for, as caretakers of God's creation, period.
Okay.
Not really benefit ourselves, but just to take care of it.
But what does he tell him to do? Go eat of it.
So eat of the fruit
Yeah.
of the vegetables.
I'm sure that to sustain life, I don't know.
So to sustain life.
About animals, I don't, they have a sense of fear of humans.
Nope, they don't at this time. Not yet.
If we, and I can,
We're not.
if we take care of them, we feed them, whatever animal it is, if they see that we got that we care for them and feed them, they start coming to us, like being fed. Just like we get fed by the word of God.
Right?
We didn't have to feed them then though, because God gave every living creature everything that it needed to live. It gave
Well,
them
okay,
every
so let's go
green
to that.
path.
Right, so go to that point. What did everything eat at this time?
Plants.
Plants. Everything was vegetarian. That's why I was not born at those times. But everything was vegetarian.
Over acres, told everybody eat meat.
No. It doesn't talk about that till after the flood.
He didn't give them dominion over everything.
What don't they have
They don't
dominion
have
over?
dominion over the earth, the water, seasons,
Well, not the
plants,
seasons.
only the living creatures. That's the only thing he gave them.
It says fill the earth and subdue it though, so I thought that implied the whole entire earth. So maybe
Right.
not the stars in the universe, but everything on earth. It says fill the earth and subdue it. So that'd be like. the
Fill,
whole earth.
meaning coconut.
But it says and subdue it though.
Right.
That would put everything under his authority on the earth.
I mean, the image usually is that Adam is this, I think somebody mentioned, Adam is this caretaker of the garden. Part of what I think we struggle with is the fact that we have been programmed into thinking that we are in service to creation. We're going to build a building, but there's a tree in the way. And people say, what?
Can't cut it down.
You can't cut it down. Who is ruling who?
Tree.
The tree. Yeah.
But then what the Bible says, it says, we're supposed to subdue it.
What does that mean?
Cut it down.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he didn't say cut them all down.
Right.
At the same
No, he didn't.
Strip the forest.
And at this point, he didn't say to cut any of them down. But the point is, we have been so programmed into thinking that the creation is to rule our life. And it's interesting, up in Chicago, there was a music festival that was supposed to be taking place on a beach that they've done for years, but because there's some bird that's nesting there right now, they wanted them to what? Yeah, cancel the festival, move it someplace else because of these birds were nesting there. I mean, out in West Texas, they wanted to drill for oil, but because of some lizard that nobody has ever even seen, they were told what? Can't drill. You might upset this lizard. Who is serving who? Who is serving who? Now, does that mean we go through and just chop down every tree? No. But the answer isn't because of the sake of the tree. The answer is we don't do it for the sake of who? The neighbor. Who are we always to be looking after? The neighbor. So maybe we don't level every tree, not because of it's wrong to do to the tree. You know what, last time I checked, trees don't have any feelings. They don't.
We've got a real life example. They were trying to build a road somewhere, and he knows the statistics of how many people get killed running into trees if they're really close to the road. So the design was to take out this tree, but the person whose place was next to it got so irate and almost like issued threats and stuff. You know, not physical threats,
Right.
but in other ways. And so it's amazing how people, they can care less about human life if it just means getting to keep this tree, you know, right there. So,
How many of you have seen roads that do this?
Yeah.
And what's right here?
Mostly California.
A tree. Yeah, in California. Except there, they'll drill holes right through the tree. I mean, how's that? We won't cut it down, we'll just go right through it. But yes, exactly. You know, and so whose life is more important?
the tree apparently.
The
according to
tree.
that guy.
The tree than man who is made in the image of God. Will let man be killed driving into this tree rather than cutting it down? Who is serving who? No one else that shows a lack of
Sense.
sense.
Absolutely. Good sense.
Trust. Trust in who? In God. Oh! We have to make all these alternative fuels because we're going to run out of oil at some point. Can God maybe not come along with something else?
That's
Is there-
that's also when they thought it took millions of years for that oil to
Right.
create, and that's actually, doesn't take that long.
Yeah, we'll talk about that when we get to the flood, but it's a lack of trust of God. Yes, sir.
Well, I think most of us, at one time or another, have always used the phrase, Mother Nature will repair itself. And really, he's saying God will repair it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, who's Mother Nature?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But God fixes a lot of stuff.
But as a
He
caretaker,
does.
us, as a caretaker of what's here on earth,
Right?
you cut one tree down, you plant 5.
Can, right? The interesting thing at this point is there was no cutting down of trees. And everything was growing perfectly. But, yeah, as a caretaker, we can do that, right? Cut down, so you cut down this tree and build the road straight, but you know what, you can plant,
Trees on either side.
yeah.
But
Oh,
not
wow.
too close.
Gosh, yeah, too
That makes
close.
too much sense.
That almost sounds like Revelation, where it talks of the trees on both sides. Anyway, someone else.
When they built the Alaska pipeline, they said that it was gonna upset the wild animal life up there. It never happened.
Right.
They might to this matter.
Yeah.
They walk under it.
So,
So they
when
can
those
be
went,
warm.
but they did. Yeah, there's your alternative energy. Killing birds. Plus, they've also found that the wind turbines are creating hotspots. When they look from the aerial view, where the wind turbines are, it's actually hotter than the surrounding areas. It's impacting the environment, so, yeah. I mean, how long did we hear, oh, we're ruining the ozone layer, we've created this hole, and oh, by the way, oh, we gotta get rid of aerosols, oh, and oh, when we can't use incandescent light bulbs anymore, oh, we can't. And then science comes out and says, oh, we think maybe that hole's always been there. Who is ruling who? Now, like I say, for the sake of the neighbor, yeah, maybe we don't cut down all the trees. Cedar, I think it'd be okay to get rid of.
Now that we have metal posts.
Okay. So what else do we have here? So we've touched on it briefly. What was everything to eat?
Plants, seed bearing.
Seed, grass. So what was, pardon?
No animal, not yet.
No animals. So there was no meat. There was no barbecue yet. Were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say, can you just try to walk somewhere else, because it's going in and out. If you go over by like the plant over there, you're kind of lost. You keep on going, don't do that.
So stand here.
Don't do that.
Here.
Or you're in like, you know.
Beasts and birds.
But we're not eating.
There were beasts, there were birds, there was, remember, we talked about that, it was probably 6 months ago now. We talked that there was cattle, there was deer, there was all these things. I mean, pretty much within reason, maybe not the number of species and that, but all the animals we have now existed what? Then. I say there may be only one kind of dog at this time or something.
One kind of cow.
One kind of cow, yeah.
Well, are you saying dog or wolf? They go on a rabbit trail there.
Right.
Two of each.
Canine, there you go.
Well, I asked because I have a dog that's 2,000 years old, breed is 2,000 years old, but the vet was using it back in the day.
Okay.
So, it's not weird.
But even after 2,000 years, it's still what?
It's still just,
Still, yeah, a canine.
rabbit trails.
Yep, oh yeah, no. But it just goes to prove that it still stayed
The same.
the same. So you've got all these animals, all these people, all this stuff living together, and they're all eating what?
Plants.
Plants. Which means,
Bazinga.
sure,
that comment over here.
You know, I just said he'd have the body he was requesting earlier, because it'd be plant-based, so.
We all had to eat the cow.
There's something that has to be different there for now, because there's no way today we could live on this.
Okay, why?
Because you can't get to this. It's just.
Okay, Roberts.
You can do.
Right.
I'm
So
saying
does that-
it's just plants, you cannot live.
Right, so does that possibly tell us, and it's your point, that the plants that exist today are different than the plants at the time of Adam?
Could be. But the fact that we have plants in yet, struck down by God, there might have been a change there as well.
Oh, okay,
Well, there was a change, obviously, but at this level.
right. And we'll come back to that point. I guess Paul talks about that. So what was the relationship, though, here between man and animals?
It's not equal,
It's not equal.
because we
Okay.
have dominion over
We have
it.
dominion over them. Okay,
It was not fear, there was no fear.
all right, so there was rule, but there was no fear.
Cohabitation.
Pardon?
Cohabitation.
Cohabitation?
They got luck. They bit you.
Right, but, see here, and Luther kind of makes this point. Here is where we struggle in our mind. And this is why Luther comes down to when he talks about, you know, this whole image of God, what that means. He eventually comes down on it after he spends pages and pages. See, it's not just by the plan.
No, I wonder if it's the battery.
No, I just replaced it. But he comes down on the fact that what life was like pre-fall, we really don't know. We really can't grasp. Because we don't know what a world looks like without sin. So what was this relationship like? We can kind of picture, but immediately when we think of rule, because of our sinful nature, we think of rule often as being, beating something down. Rule with an iron fist, and all this, But pre-fall rule wouldn't have meant that. Rule would have meant, care, but that the animal would have been subservient to man and not try to bite your finger through the cage.
But you do see that well, my view of farm life. You accept your animals, you feed your animals, and they kind of do what they want to do in their area.
Right.
And you're still ruling them because you can withhold the food or you can withhold the water. But you keep supplying it because they're good for you and you're good for them.
Right.
And that's no fear there.
Except for the wild ones. They didn't mention about.
Right. But wild, there again, would not have been wild the way we think of wild.
Yeah. But-
Wild would be like lions and tigers and bears, oh my. It would have been the non-domesticated animals. So it's domesticated versus the wild. But the wild still would not have. See if that helps.
Turn it off and turn it back on, maybe
I don't worry about it now.
But even later on, God had to say, okay, now, you people and snakes will hate each other. Because
That's
they
coming.
didn't before.
That's coming.
I know, it's coming, but they didn't have that
Correct.
relationship before until he
Right.
said, this is the way it's gonna be. And I think that kind of meant all animals would have a fear of man and stay away, unless you domesticate them.
Right. Which, and this was kind of a point Jim was making earlier, and I erased it now, but goes back to this point of what was man's relationship with God? Even though God ruled man, Adam wasn't jealous of God. Adam wasn't looking at God with contempt or with fear, or there was, and so this was the picture of how man and creation to be. If we see the story of God and man and creation, we should see it very much as the same story. So when the fall comes along, what happens between the relationship between God and man? It gets what? Right, no trust, betrayed, it becomes broken. When sin comes into the world, what happens between the relationship of man and creation? It gets
Broken.
broken. It's somewhat the same story. Because as we're going to see, when the fall happens, God uses creation for what? For the sake of who? For man. And he has no qualms about doing it. As we will hear. Why? Who is it all made for? For us. You're jumping over a whole chapter. All right. So any questions about any of that?
Did God know we were gonna mess this all up?
So I hear some people say yep. Anybody else?
That's why he already has a plan for our salvation.
Then why did he bother?
Ah, why did he bother? We'll talk about that. We'll talk about
The cliffhanger.
that. Why did he bother? That's right. Keep me coming back.
Join us next week.
Right. And so God saw that everything he made was
Good.
good? No, what does he say?
Very good.
Yeah.
It's now very good. So everything he has made is now very good, which tells us what? That everything that, now we don't want to say, and sometimes we slip up and say, so God is done finishing creating. And is that true?
No.
No. I mean, for instance, we hear at the flood, God creates what?
Rainbow.
A rainbow. So God's not done necessarily creating. He's done creating creation, the building blocks, if you would.
The people who were leaning towards science will agree with me on that rainbow thing. They'll say that scientifically rainbows are already there, despite, God creating that flood. That argument's important.
It's very good.
You can't.
talk about it. It's all there. All right, so it's very good. So my time is almost up. So while it is not mentioned, somewhere along the line here in these 6 days, there was somebody else that was made. Angels. So somewhere in these 6 days, angels came in to being. We're not told when. Now why God doesn't tell us, I don't know. We can launch off all sorts of ideas and suppositions and all sorts of, but the truth of the matter is, we don't know, because he hasn't told us. But we do know they're there because we hear of their influence. Yeah. And we also know at this point, because everything was very good, there was no what? Sin. There was still no sin in the world at the end of the 6th day. Which goes against what some people believe, that on the 6th day, Adam and Eve had already fallen into sin. But God would not have declared it very good if that had happened.
Do you think it's fair to say that before the fall of man, that they had free will, in the sense that even though God knows what's going to happen no matter what, we still have the choice to make that right or wrong decision? Like, you think that would be applicable back then? Because, they didn't have to listen to conservative, but they did. But it didn't have to be one another, but they did.
Right.
So, do you think they had that factor that they could have chosen not to, or it was just a different scenario?
Oh, no, I think they could have not listened to the serpents. Otherwise, God did not predetermine them to fall.
Right. I don't know, like God knows what's going to happen, why bother? Well, because they still have the choice.
Right. And knowing the outcome doesn't mean, one of my favorite things is, you can have a hot pot on the stove and see a child reaching out to touch it, and you know what? That when they touch it, they're going to get burned, but did you cause them to get burned? No. You knew what the result would be, but you didn't cause the result.
Some point in time here, just the creation of angels, the fall and heaven, and
Yep, and we'll get there. All right. Yep. Let's close with the singing of the doxa. Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise Him, all creatures here below. Praise Him above, ye heavenly hosts. Praise Father.